Hello, folks. My name is Will, and I am the lead behind the YouTube channel Terra Firma. And today I'm here to talk to you about how to use interactive geographic or geologic map portals. They're also geographic, so I guess that works. Anyway, as you can see here on Google, I have searched for Utah Interactive Geologic Map. You can find geologic maps for other states as well, but this is based in Utah. So here I'm going to go ahead and load it. It's giving me a little guide here of how to move the screen around, but don't really need that explained. If you notice here, you see all these colors, and these colors are going to seem like sorcery and just mysticism to people who don't know what they mean. So let's go first over some of the features before we start talking about what those colors actually mean. This is a overview geologic map, which means it covers things such as where units are, not necessarily where they're exposed on the surface, but where they are. So just because it says you can find this here, it might be under some dirt. That's important to take note of. Over here we have map players. The map players can be toggled on and off. As you can see, turning off this turns off 1 to 500,000 scale maps. And what a 1 to 500,000 scale map is 1 inch on this map. If you had this map in paper, or if you were using an online ruler to measure things on this map, 1 inch would equal 500,000 inches if you were out in the field. So, everything here is 1 to 500,000 scale. That's what that means. Here we have the intermediate scale maps. What that means is maps that are a little less stretched out. It's a much more fine scale. As you can see when I turn this off, if you look in the yellow area here where my cursor is, Morgan County, all the fine formations are gone. It's only showing big, general, regional formations. So if I turn that back on, you can see that it's suddenly got more detail. If I turn this on, the 1 to 24,000 scale maps, you're bombarded with so much information that you don't even know what to do with it. So I recommend you do not turn that on, because it just makes things a lot more complicated. Unless you're doing really precise geologic work, you really don't need that scale. All right. Sometimes I have to scroll in and out to refresh it after messing with the options. You can turn on map footprints here, which gives you regional squares to help you locate things. If you mouse over them, it will tell you on the bottom of the screen. It's a little hard to see. I'll move it over here so you can see it better. It'll tell you what quadrant it's from. For example, it says this is from the Ogden quadrant, and it gives you latitude, longitude, and scale. So this map is a 1 to 128,000 scale map, this quadrant here. Not all maps are going to be the same scale, and not all are going to be the same quadrant, obviously. So we're going to then turn off map footprints, and we can start doing streets and reference. Now, streets and reference will make the map a little more complicated looking, but if you're trying to find where something is on this map and you can't quite figure out where the formation is, that'll really help. Without streets and reference, you can still see some features, like this says the Cache National Forest over here. And if we go down here, you can see Brigham City Airport, the Manaway Reservoir, or Reservation and Reservoir, things like that. So you can still find things without the streets reference. It just gives you extra information. And the U.S. Geology map just expands it beyond Utah. So if you want to look at other states, you turn on U.S. Geology map. Otherwise, it's just the Utah map. Oops, didn't need to open that yet. So now we've talked about the map layers. There's some other tools over here that are kind of neat. The click options, which is also this tab up here, is unit descriptions and map downloads. So if you want to download maps, you can click on a quadrant and it'll give you the appropriate map down here. You can get PDF files or GeoTIFF, which requires a program to open. Usually you want PDF if you're just going to download it. You can also share quadrants this way as a nice little shareable map link button. And it has some other features. So playing around with that is a good idea. We have search for maps option. So searching for maps will allow you to find a quadrant that you're not sure where it is. So if I wanted to find, say, the Ogden quadrant, or if I wanted to find Beaver County quadrant or whatever it may be named, you can search in this little search box up here, and it will help you find that quadrant. So let's do the Ogden quad. Bam. It opens up the Ogden quadrant and highlights it and gets it on the map downloads. So it's a pretty easy way to find it. By the way, there are two quadrants. They're just different scales. This is the 1 to 62,000 scale Ogden quadrant map. And this is the 1 to 24,000 scale. How many maps you have of a given area is just based on how much geologic research has been done and how much mapping has been done. So you can't really know if there's going to be multiple quads until you look. And some places only have like old documents with hand-drawn maps. Some of it's not terribly updated for the internet, but in general, you can find most places quite easily. This is the layer opacity button. It just makes it so, darker or light or colored, whatever you need. If you make it light colored, it makes it really easy to find roads and cities. Make it dark colored and you won't see anything but the layers. So it's a useful tool. We have the go to a location tool. It is similar to the search for maps tool, except you can put in an address or a city or anything sort of like that, and it will send you to that location. I would use the use current location button, but I'm in pre-bound browsing, so I don't think it knows. Let's see. Allow. Oh, hey, it worked. Cool. So this sent me to my home, and now I can see what's around my home. So that's pretty cool. If you're out in the field, you can also use the use current location button, and it'll take you to the geologic map of where you're at. So you can get a good look of what's around, assuming you've got an internet signal. If you don't have a signal in the field, obviously that's not going to do anything for you. These are the map configurations. So if you want to use coordinates in decimal degrees, you can use this button. Or degrees for minutes and seconds, you use the second button. Toggling vertical exaggeration is a way to make it look like there's features like the mountains look like mountains from a side view. It makes it bumpy. And while that's useful, honestly, if you want to use a 3D map, just use Google Earth. 2D is honestly a lot easier to work with, and you usually won't need anything else. So now we've covered that. You can zoom in and out with the tools on the left sidebar here, but I'm just using scroll wheel to zoom in and out because it's easier. So currently we have the topo map open, and topographic maps are, you look here on my screen, there are these little lines, okay? And what these little lines mean is the average elevation along that line is whatever the number is. So it may not be exactly that elevation all along, but someone went out there and took multiple measurements. Like here, they would have been like, okay, it's 6240 here. And then they took one over here and they're like, oh, it's 6240 here by these dots. And they went over here and it's like, oh, it's still 6240, but now it's not, So what they do is once they have multiple measurements, they draw lines between the measurements and make average estimates of height. So all along this contour line here, that's what it's called, you would be at roughly 6240 elevation. And with contour lines, you can figure out which direction a slope is going by the rule of V's. The rule of V's is basically this. If a V is opening, the open direction is the downward direction. And that only applies in areas that are like rivers. So here we got this little thing here by the THV. You see all these V-shaped indents going down? They're coming from a higher elevation. You can confirm that by looking at the numbers. This is 6120, that's 6200. So you know that must be lower elevation. And you can tell there's a river here because there's open V's going in that direction. Or there could be a river. When I say there could be a river, I don't mean there actually is one. It's a drainage zone where the mountain will drain in that shape. It's also where a canyon or a gulch is. So if you went there, it would look like a canyon or a gulch. So there's lots of little markers all over this map, and we'll cover those in a later video. Right now, we're going to talk about geologic units and how to find cool rockhounding spots using this map, or just to figure out what formation you're looking at when you're outside looking at something. We're going to start with, let's say we want to start over in the Uintas, because why not? I like the Uintas. So I'm going to use the search tool, find a location, and type in Samick, Utah. Because I like Samick. It has some cool fossils near it. Alright, here we go. It sent me to Samick, Utah, which is just east of Camas, and I will use the map opacity tool here to show you. There's Camas and there's Samick. And I'm going to leave it on a faint opacity right here. There we go. So you can see the features easier. So you see all these letters here. These letters stand for different units. So if I click on this, I got to go to unit descriptions on the top. If I click on this with unit descriptions on, it'll pop up in the bottom right of the screen saying the Round Valley Formation is Lower Pennsylvania. If you read the description, it tells you there is light gray weathering, gray to dark gray, fossiliferous limestone containing gray and reddish gray chert, and interbeds of gray and light green shale and siltstone, and so forth and so forth. So you're inevitably going to run into terms that you don't understand when reading this, and that's where you're going to end up doing probably a lot of Googling to learn what they are. For example, it says there are pale reddish orange silicified fossils are in between the thickness ranges from 300 meters to about 60 meters on the eastern ridge of the Quadriga, according to that, for the City Creek area. We're not in the City Creek area, so that's a general descriptor for the unit, but it does point out that it's characteristic of this formation, and I can confirm that I have found silicified fossils. What a silicified fossil is what people normally call an agatized fossil. Agatized is a nickname for the process of silicification, where carbonate rocks like limestone or calcite, since a lot of fossils are calcite, are dissolved out, leaving a void. And that void is in the shape of the fossil. And then what happens is silica-rich groundwater and fluids seeps in, and as the water passes through, it notices there's a void that's lower pressure than the surrounding rock. And because of the lower pressure, the silica is dropped in that void. And it becomes like a mold. Like if you've ever made soap or candles, and you've used molds in that regard, it's kind of like it just fills it in with the goop, and then eventually it dries, much like those candles. It cools off and solidifies, and then you're left with a agatized fossil, because the original fossil is dissolved out and silica has replaced it. Anyway, so just by using this map and clicking here, I found out a wealth of information that it's a fossiliferous limestone, which means there's a lot of fossils. There are a high percentage of the limestone. It gave me the color of it, so I can identify it in the field, and talked about the bedding. So if I see multiple beds, I can figure out what bed it's from. And if it's the shale bed, or the limestone bed, or the sandstone, or the sandy limestone. So you get wealths of information from a map like this. If I look over here, right here, we find that there's also the Donut Formation, Upper Mississippian, which also contains a lot of chert, which jasper, chalcedony, agate, those are all considered cherts. So when it says there's chert, you might find any of those. Though in general, the chert is probably going to be normal chert, which is a tough, grainy looking mineral. If you haven't seen what chert looks like, you can look it up. Flint is a kind of chert, but we don't really have much flint in Utah. We have a lot of things that's like flint, but not true flint. Anyway, what we have here is, as I said, it's got a lot of chert in fossils. It says abundant fossils, and explains the layers. So if we were in this area, since up here is a high elevation area, you can see that with the contour lines. 7160 over here is the peak of the area. And that means rocks from this area probably have fallen downhill or gone down stream beds. Right here, we can tell that there's a stream bed because of the rule of V's, which means if there was a stream here, it could have brought the fossils down here. So even if you're not on the formation itself, if you're near it, and if there's a mechanism of transport, you will find fossils elsewhere. So even down in the city down here, you could find the fossils that are part of this formation, because they are downhill and also downstream from this mountain. Conversely, you'll also find fossils from this formation down here in this formation, on top of it. Not likely in it if you had an outcrop, but sometimes outcrops overlap. You also find this next formation over here, the Humboldt Formation. Also contains a lot of limestone dolomite and limestone breccia, though it makes no mention of fossils. There probably are fossils, but they are not abundant. So your best luck, if you're looking in this area, is to not go uphill into this formation, because it's very unlikely that the fossils from these two formations ended up uphill in this formation. However, if you are looking for dolomite or limestone breccia, you want to look here. So you just gotta think when you're looking at these maps, okay, here's the formation, but is there an outcrop? You can use Google Earth to go look to see if there's an outcrop. You find where this is, where the city is. You're like, okay, this is by Camas. Right here is Camas. So if we went on Google Earth, we can look at Camas and then slowly migrate over to this until we find this formation. And then we can go looking at Google Earth and see if we can see any obvious rocky outcrops. You want to go where you can see rocky outcrops, and then you can find stuff that way. That's the easiest way to find the outcrops, because these IUGS does not involve an outcrop map. However, outcrop maps are a thing, so you can also look online and try and find an outcrop map, which is specifically a geologic map to show the locations of rocky outcrops for geologic purposes. So there's that. And let's do another example of where we might find stuff. We're going over here to Knoblets Creek. Let's see. Knoblets Creek is doing a little bit of navigation. Moment. Beep boop. Beep boop boop beep. You know what? I'm just gonna have it find it for me. No, that's the wrong state. I want Knoblets Creek in Utah. Here we go. Zoom to. Zoom to. Zoom to. Zoom to. Zoom. Zoom. Okay, here we are at Knoblets Creek. And Knoblets Creek is a popular rockhounding spot because it has a lot of fossils. And the reason it has so many fossils is quite obvious once you start looking at the formations near it. So here's the trailhead that goes into the Knoblets Creek Trail. And if we look here, we can see this big gray formation right here. The Madison limestone. The Madison limestone is extremely well known for having abundant fossils. It is the same formation at Sardine Pass. It is the same kind of limestone. So if you've ever been to Sardine Pass with all the horned coral and stuff, it's another outcrop of that same kind of limestone. That doesn't mean it will have the same stuff. Regional formations vary on the local scale. So you might find different stuff here. It's just the same time range and the same kind of rock. Okay. So as you can see in the description, it does say that it's a dark to light gray, thin to medium bedded fossiliferous limestone near the base. So that's a good sign that there's fossils. Let's look at one of the other formations, which is the humbug formation. We were just looking at that earlier in a different location. And we know the humbug doesn't have much in the way of fossils. But that's okay, because if we go across the street here, we can find the donut formation. We know that one had fossils when we were looking earlier. And that it's got a bunch of abundant chert and themes of that sort. When we go up here, we have the Round Valley Formation, which is also a limestone and silicified fossil range. So that's good. That's a promise of fossils. And then we go up here, and it says we have the Morgan Formation, which is also fossiliferous limestone. So we've got at least 4 formations here that contribute fossils, and they're all in these mountain ranges here. So this is a high area, which means they're going to go downhill like doop, 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 and end up in this Knoblets Creek area. So anywhere in Knoblets Creek, you're likely to find a lot of fossils. And if you go down the trailhead here, you're likely to find a lot as well because there's so much of the Madison Formation, and there's even the possibility that these other formations over here had their fossils travel, since it's relatively flat ground in the creek. So that's great for finding fossils. What about... Okay, here we are at Millay Gulch, also better known by you guys as Maxfield Mine. We're going to talk about why the minerals are here and use the map units to explain why they're here in the first place. First, we can see here we have the Gardison limestone from the lower Mississippian. It is a fossiliferous limestone, I can confirm, as I have found horned coral and other themes that are in the Mississippian in the limestone. But that's only part of the story. Maxfield Mine is what is known as a skarn. A skarn is a geologic feature where there's an igneous intrusion, which an igneous intrusion is where you have hydrothermal fluids or magma that permeates an existing rock body or structure, in this case limestone. With skarns, it's usually limestone or other carbonate rock. And what happens is the fluids dissolve the carbonate rock, the limestone, and deposit minerals in the void left behind from the dissolving. And this is what Maxfield Mine is. Maxfield Mine's what's known as a dolostone copper skarn. That means there is an abundance of copper minerals, particularly sulfides, which is a mineral group. A lot of these fall under sulfides, such as pyrite, and galena, and sphalerite. Anyway, back to the original point here. Dolostone is a rock that's made out of dolomite. For quick reference, so a dolostone copper skarn tells you a lot about the area. Anyway, we can see here that there is, in fact, limestone. So that's a beginning point. But if we go to this formation next to it, we find that we also have dolomite and limestone, containing abundant lenses and pods of dark gray chert. So chert is deposited in limestone the same way as a skarn. As mentioned earlier, what happens is silica-rich fluids dissolve the limestone and deposits the silica in the form of chert. So what it means here is that there was some hydrothermal activity. You wouldn't have chert in there unless you had hydrothermal activity to deposit the chert. Okay, so that's a good indicator of possibly there being a skarn in the area. Now, if we look at this, we find there is diorite. And if you look at this formation, it's rather abrupt and completely surrounded by the limestone. This suggests that it is an intrusion. It bursts through the formation and deposits the diorite. So intrusions happen after the fact. So the limestone was here first, and then the diorite showed up. Then split it open and deposit all the gooey stuff, whatever brought up with it. The diorite is a hornblende diorite, which means it's got a large amount of hornblende in it. It's the primary non-silicate mineral in it. And there's also biotite quartz diorite and gabbro. It actually gives you the age of the diorite here, if that's something you're interested in. Anyway, the contact point between diorite and limestone is the skarn. What happens is it deposits the minerals that came up with the diorite in the skarn, and also the contact point causes metamorphism. Metamorphism is when a mineral is transformed into another mineral. So you have low-grade metamorphism to intermediate metamorphism on the boundary between the limestone and the diorite. And this forms a lot of minerals, including things like Vesuvianite and epidote and serpentine. But it's also where the fluids containing all the copper-rich minerals came up too. And that's why in this gulch here, you can see by the rule of V's that we have a gulch here. As I mentioned earlier, this is higher elevation, the contour lines. Mind you, rule of V's only works if the point of the V is higher than the point to the next V. So basically it has to be downhill. So this point is a higher point than this point here. And once you establish that, then you know the opening of the V is wherever the gulch or the canyon or the stream is going. And there is in fact a stream at Maxwell Mine that drains down into the river down here. The river marked by this blue line by Mill A Gulch. So while in this video I'm showing you guys how to raid certain locations, I'm not saying you need to go to those two locations. They're just random examples, okay? There are many, many places in Utah to find great rocks. And this will help you figure out why the rocks are there, or help you find a new spot to look for rocks. You know, it's like anywhere there's the Farmington Canyon Formation, which is obviously named for Farmington Canyon, tends to have a lot of nice feldspar crystals. You can find garnets. I had a friend who found star sapphire in the Farmington Canyon Formation. So it's a pretty good spot. So this formation here, the brown one that I have clicked on, marked by XFCGS here, is the gneiss and schist of Farmington Canyon Complex. And it's got, as you can see in the description, a fair amount of nice biotite schist and a little bit of white quartzite. It does not have a widespread amount of sillimanite or garnet in this particular part of the Farmington Canyon Complex. Now, there's multiple formations that will be marked on the map that are part of the Farmington Canyon Complex group. Okay? It's a group with subunits in it. This particular bit is not particularly interesting. However, the one next to it, let's see up here, is the Magmatic Gneiss of Farmington Canyon Complex. This stuff is where I was finding garnets. Now, the garnets weren't super big. As it says, it has widespread garnet and biotite. But that was just my luck of the draw. You can get garnets up to like 2 inches big. I mean, they get fairly large. But I mostly found small ones. There was a boulder of schist that had a ton of garnets in it. And, I got some from there. They were interesting. If you're going there looking for garnets as good as Topaz Mountain, good luck. I've only found really old weathered ones, but I still think they're cool. And you could find mica books. Biotite is a kind of mica, and you will find small books of that. A book of mica is simply a stack of mica crystals. Mica forms long sheets. It's a it's a monoclinic mineral, which means it has one plane of cleavage, one facet. And a book of that is, if you imagine the pages in a book, except you replace the pages with mica, that's what you have. That's why we call it a book. Anyway, so what magmatic means? A magmatite is a kind of igneous rock that has abundant small crystals in it. So in like the Black Hills of South Dakota, we have pegmatites. And pegmatites have large crystals. And South Dakota's Black Hills are incredible for it. I've gotten large schist, from in the schist, I've gotten large starlight samples. I got large tourmalines, large hornblends, huge stuff. But magmatite means much smaller. So they're not super big in general. However, I have found feldspar crystals in this formation of 2 to 4 inches in size. So while magmatite describes the general layout of the crystals, it does not mean there is absolutely no large crystals to be found in this area. I have found large feldspar, and I have found relatively okay garnets, so there's that. Over here is just material left over from like glaciers. That's what the scarp is. Glacial scarps. Anyway, as you can see, both of these belong to the Farmington Canyon Complex, but they're different formations. So if you are looking on your map and you see XFC and then followed by something else, it's probably the Farmington Canyon Complex, because that's the code for it. Over here, we have a different kind. This says there's bedrock blocks that is not in place, which isn't going to be very useful if you're going there to rockhound. Farmington Canyon Complex occurs in lots of spots. It even occurs on Antelope Island, and you can see boulders with garnets in them if you go to where the Farmington Canyon Complex is, like right here. It has a thorough description of the Farmington Canyon Complex on Antelope Island. Reminder, Antelope Island, you cannot collect rocks at. And I strongly encourage you guys to please be ethical. I mean, there's plenty of rocks to go around, but certain locations, if everyone started taking rocks from, they would lose a lot of their value to research and for aesthetic reasons. Antelope Island gets millions of visitors. If they all took 3 rocks, we'd be down millions of rocks, which makes a big difference. So don't take rocks from where you're not supposed to. And when you are collecting rocks, only take what you're actually going to reasonably use. I mean, I'm not here to judge you, and there is the legal laws, whatever, for Utah that per person, I think it's adults, but it might be children as well. Per person, you're supposed to only collect 200 pounds of rock counting material per year without a rock counting permit or some sort of collection permit. If you get a commercial collection permit, you can collect more than 200 from specified areas, specifically national forests. So there are ways to get around that 200 limit. People violate that all the time. They usually don't get caught unless they violate it to extreme levels. I encourage you guys to not violate it because it's the spirit of the law rather than the letter of the law in this case. That 200-pound limit is trying to prevent people from over-collecting and ruining locations, and so that there is locations for other people to collect from. Because we all want to have a bit of fun, and popular rock counting spots gets a lot less popular if somebody comes by and takes way more than they should. So I encourage you guys to please be respectful. And on my personal end of this thing, I'm not aware of ever collecting more than 200 pounds in 1 year. I'm honestly don't have enough time to collect that much weight. But, that's something you guys should keep in mind. My next video is going to be on the spiral jetty. I'm going to talk about the geology of the area and how the crystals formed and various hazards that are located there and why people are having a bit of a discussion about whether it needs to be patrolled or not and whether or not we need to block access. So thank you for watching the premiere video of Terra Firma, and I hope this helps you guys learn how to use the Geologic map. And this is probably the easiest way to get started. It's pretty in your face and tells you exactly what's there. So have a good time.